Loren Taves owns Taves Family Farms, amongst a few other things out there, and I visited him a couple times out on the farm in the valley, as well as been at a media dinner with him last fall. So there's a lot to learn here on the farming side of things and how the farm, what people are growing out of the farm and how it's being used locally in Vancouver and outside of Vancouver and where they're selling to and all that kind of things too. So a lot of products being grown in, and I think he's got some products with him. So welcome, Laura.
When I thought about perfectionism in farming, you can go in so many directions there, down to how you care for the plants or how you care for your equipment, and there's a different direction. But I actually, when I thought about farming, I had to think about my whole life in farming, and so this afternoon I've been thinking about this for about a month, and I just started writing, and so I have notes not like the other guys, but it's how I work. My name is Loren Taves. we have about 3 farms down in Abbotsford on a road called Glavin Road. It's a dead end road. It stops at the U.S. border, and actually my home is right at the U.S. border. When I go up my house, there's a big concrete pillar. On one side it says Canada, the other side it says United States, and sometimes when I catch my kids in the U.S., we got to pull them back because it's a big forest there. But we live right on the border, and it's a very beautiful location actually. And if any of you have ever been to the Applebarn, which is a retail store we have there in the fall, it's a beautiful countryside. But I thought about perfectionism, and perfectionism I think is a delicate, it's like a 3-pronged balance in farming, that is, of good marketing, because you've got to have a place to sell what you're growing. Financial stability, you got to work with banks because farmers have a lot of debt because everything's terribly expensive, like land. And a mix of love and knowledge of growing food, coupled with the right people to get the tasks done. And I think that part where having a love for what you're doing is what's driven me. And like we was talking about, like waking up at night, that happens to me all the time. And I just wake up and I think about what we're doing in the land and where we're going and what we're going to grow next year, and it's all encompassing. It's something that you live it. And the last prong also means being a caretaker of the land and the environment in order to keep the land productive for future generations. I've got quite a few kids, and some of them are interested in farming, I think, but they're quite young yet. But I want the farm to continue on. And simply to put a seed in the ground and not have the 3 elements I talked about perfectly in line can make for a possible failure. And now and for the next generation. I'm 47 years old. When I first started farming my own was in 1985, right out of high school. I just wanted to grow crops and make some money to go to university, which I did. I actually went to Simon Fraser and studied, but it was a sideline, but I loved it. And my brother, was a little older than me, and my dad and myself had endless talks about growing crops. And you might think, how boring can you get? No, we didn't want to be like everybody else. I don't know, my brother, we just had it in us. We just didn't like, everybody was planting blueberries, we're not going to plant. Everybody's planting raspberries, we're not going to plant that. We planted gooseberries, we planted currants, we planted apples in the Fraser Valley. We just did things that nobody else was doing because it just wasn't in our DNA. And today, my first prong actually in the market was the marketing. And it was something, a little alliterated little word, it was to sell what you sow. And identifying the markets and the changing needs over the last 30 years has been a wild ride. My brother used to make up complex budgets and showed amazing results, but the influences of changing demand, pests, and bad business arrangements always stole the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We'd have the most amazing setups, and we're going to make a ton on this, and there was always something that came in, and it didn't quite work out. But we loved farming, so we worked at it even though it was marginally profitable at the time. And I remember taking my dad's Dodge Maxi van to Granville Islands Market back in, I think it was 1989. We'd get there early Saturday morning, and we would sell gooseberries and elephant garlic there to the people getting off the bus. And because our wholesale customers just suddenly didn't buy from us, or we just couldn't get the right price, and we didn't want to go broke. So, but that was how it started. And but then my brother went into teaching, and I continued on in farming. And we had planted apples and different varieties, the Jonna Gold apple, and I think we were one of the first people to bring Honeycrisp into BC. If not in 1998, I planted Honeycrisp apples. Before we knew it was going to be a big hit, I tasted an apple at a trade show and I said, "This is it," and I bought the trees and I brought some in, and we also bought a very highly intensive capital greenhouse down the street, because I've always been driven by needing to keep the land. And so we planted an orchard around a greenhouse, my neighbor's greenhouse, and I started farming these Jonna Golds, and we worked there night and day. And all of a sudden my neighbor says, "You know what, Loren? I've got this 4.5 acre greenhouse, you've got all your apples around here, why don't you buy me out, I want to move on." And I said, "Ooh, well, how much do you want for the place?" "Well, $3 million. And I said, "Oh, that's a lot of money." So I went to the bank, and you know, banks are with farmers, they'll just give you all the money because they know they got a hook on you. Right? So they lent me the money and we started farming in the greenhouse. But right away when I took over the greenhouse, I says, "I don't want to grow what everybody else is growing." So we started growing heirloom tomatoes. We started in the last while in the mini pointed peppers and baby eggplants and all those different, and we just went for it because I just felt these were great products and they've really taken off. One of the prongs that I talked about was the financial side, and that was good relationships with the bank and the bankers. And you know, the banker that helped me out the most, even when we had some real downturns in the greenhouse industry with energy going up and things, and my banker stood next to me, and he's a friend of mine now, and he's retired, but I still see him. And we build relationships in the financial community in order to keep on farming. And the financial community has believed in the farms, and that's been really good for us, good for our farm. The third prong, actually, that I talked about, and I always talk about these prongs. I thought I'd bring a prop to show the prongs. You can see 4 here. I have a 4th one I'll talk about in a minute, but there are, this is actually, my dad, if you know this guy I was going to talk about, this is very interesting because one of the ladies over here mentioned seeing how this, you see this handle and how it's been kind of cut down to fit into this piece. That's my dad. He had a stroke a few years ago. He no longer farms with me, but he would never throw anything away, and he would just work night and day with us. And this thing was probably going to get thrown away, but he couldn't, so he took a broom handle and he saved this thing that nobody ever uses anymore. But I thought I'd bring it because it kind of shows these prongs and the approaches that we have in farming. And basically, my dad and the people that worked around it, and the knowledge from the Dutch community. I went to Holland, I did some training. There's a lot of, in the operations of the farming, you've got to have dedicated, good people that just love working with food and growing food. Today at the farm, we grow about 40 acres of outdoor field crops. It's gone from just 5 acres to 40 acres. We have a greenhouse. It's a 4.5 acre greenhouse where we grow the heirloom tomatoes. And you want to talk about perfection. Greenhouses are perfection. Everything in the greenhouse is controlled. It is unbelievable. We have a computer that goes all the time making sure the water is running perfectly, that the vents are running perfectly, that everything's running. So that plant, when it's growing, reaches its maximum potential. And we also recirculate all of our fertilizer. We don't waste any water. It all gets recirculated. We use integrated pest management. We bring in insects to fight other insects. I mean, my bill just on insects alone is about $20,000, just buying in ladybugs and things like, just to make sure that the balances in the greenhouse are perfect. So in perfection, I think greenhouse industry is one of the most perfect industries you can ever get into. Outside crops, we grow red currants, pink currants, white currants, black currants, red gooseberries, green gooseberries, over 40 varieties of pumpkins, sweet corn, 8 varieties of apples. And every one of those things I planted with my crews. We selected them, we tried them, we felt they were the right things for the valley. We brought them in, and we have 40, 50,000 customers a year come to the farm in September and October, and they clean us out. And it just happened over the last 25 years. This year is our 25th year since my wife and I started the Applebarn. And we run school tours, and literally, I think we had about 8,000 school children came to the farm last year. My wife went to SFU, got her degree, then got her PDP degree. She became a teacher. She gave it all up to run the Applebarn. So she's totally dedicated to the farm as well. So it's a family effort. It's definitely a family farm, even though it's become quite large. But we work the farm with our kids and family, and quite a few people that come and work for us too. great people, by the way. We couldn't work without the love and attention we get from a lot of the local mothers and people that come out and help us in the fall. I think the fourth prong, I think, is definitely that glues it all together is a love for the farm, for farming, and getting your hands dirty, getting out there early in the morning, and weekends, it never ends actually, getting calls in the middle of the night, the alarms going off. But it is a love for what we do, and that's the story. That's a Taves Family Farm in a nutshell, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. But thank you for listening to me. One more thing, these are just a sample of what we grow in the greenhouse, so take some home if you want to. I'll just leave some out here.
You guys can do chocolate covered peppers.
Where?